Welcome to Hardcore Divers Training Talk. We're here in the gear locker today and we're going to talk about some of the questions that we've been asked by people that have walked into the dive shop and considering becoming a new diver. My name's Alan.
And I'm Rosie.
And we're going to talk about some of the questions that we've been asked most frequently by people considering becoming a diver. So what's the most common question, I guess, that you've been asked?
One of the questions that I get asked all the time is, do you have to be a good swimmer?
So no, you don't really have to be the best swimmer. I don't like swimming. I don't go to the beach. I don't swim in the ocean, but I love to dive. The requirement that I had to meet for open water was that you have to swim 200 yards in a pool without flotation devices, and you have to complete that swim without stopping, without hanging onto the sides or stopping. Using any stroke, I could go from American crawl to a backstroke to a side stroke. So it's not really a difficult test as long as you can maintain yourself at the surface of the water. The second thing that's not really a swimming element so much, but is related, is that you also have to tread water. And you have to tread water for a certain period of time. You can float, or you can use the arm and leg motions to keep your head above the water, but you have to do that for a period of time. And when I did it, and when I do it with other students, I'm in the water with them, and we'll talk. We'll have a conversation where I'll relate a story. Hopefully something that's interesting that can take the potential diver's mind off of the fact that they're having to exert a little bit of energy to stay at the surface. The best divers expend the least amount of energy while diving. The purpose is not to swim really fast, to cover a quarter mile of ocean in a half an hour. Mm-hmm. That's how you go by and miss everything that's cool in the ocean. The object is to use the least amount of energy possible and extend the amount of time you can stay underwater by regulating your breathing and keeping down your effort.
Okay, so when I'm doing the float, I mean, can you just lay on your back and float, or does it have to be a certain position?
It does not have to be a certain position. I can lay on my back and float all day long. Just keep your head back and I can stay there all day long.
Got it.
The purpose of it is to be able to stay at the surface of the water for a long enough period of time for someone to recognize that you're there. So okay. You don't have to use a particular technique. You just have to meet the requirement of keeping your head above water. Honestly, I've never had a student personally, I'm sure there have been some, but I've never personally had a student fail either of those two requirements.
Okay.
It seems to be something that most everyone can accomplish. It's not really something to be terribly worried about if you don't feel as though you're a good swimmer.
Do you have to be in perfect shape? And what about the weight aspect? I mean, people come in all different body sizes. Is there a requirement on that?
No. People come in all different sizes and types, and we've had divers that I've trained that have weighed 90 pounds and divers that have weighed 350 pounds. Okay. There's a huge spread in body type and weight of the people that dive, and it isn't an issue. Obviously, you have to have a certain level of health, but that's more of a doctor's determination to make. And because it's a doctor's determination, there is a medical questionnaire that dive shops and instructors are required to give you by their dive agency, and we encourage everybody to fill those out accurately and honestly, because you don't want to have an issue under the water that could have been prevented or could have been known ahead of time if only we were honest on our medical forms. So fill out your medical form honestly. The doctor can then help make a determination on whether you're fit to dive. Obviously, it's nice if your doctor's also a diver, right, and knows a little bit about what diving entails and the stressors that it can place on the body. Mm-hmm. But the dive agencies also provide some information with the dive medical form to assist the doctor in making that determination. So if they're not familiar, you could still go to your general practitioner and he'll get some guidelines from our dive organization is Patty, and Patty provides that information on a couple of additional sheets that come with the medical questionnaire. So we also want to educate doctors as to how they should evaluate and what are some of the things that they should consider when they make that evaluation. Obviously, the better shape you're in, the less air you may use, the less weight that you'll have to put on to overcome your buoyancy at the surface so that you can dive. But those are all things that can be worked with and that we can deal with.
Awesome.
I've never had a problem with claustrophobia, but I have talked to some people recently that are thinking of becoming divers, and they bring up the issue of, sometimes I get claustrophobic, especially if it's dark.
Right.
Do you have any experience with that, or what's your views on diving and being claustrophobic, and how do we overcome it if that's the case?
When I first started diving, I was very claustrophobic. And I dealt with that really strongly in the beginning. And so how I conquered that was to control my mind. I dove over and over, and I learned how to control my mind and to not let it wander, to use my hands as to feel out things, to use my depth gauge, to use my gauges are very important in that. If I know how much air I have, what depth I'm at, how much time I have left down there, that kind of helps to control my mind. So I'm not thinking about, oh my gosh, how fast can I get to the surface? Or, what if this happens? Or what, and it helps to control it. And it also helps to not think about what else is in the water.
So basically not letting
watch.
your imagination run away with your dive or your experience, which is really easy to do in the beginning.
It is very easy to do. And that's why I find that watching my gauges really helps to kind of focus it in. And another thing that helped me a lot was that if I get disoriented, is to touch something. So whether it be a rock, a buddy, anything, just touch it, and it'll help your mind practicing different skills and keep diving, and to get that more of a habit to where you don't let your mind wander. You focus on what you're focused on, and you enjoy your dive, and you kind of enjoy it in the moment. I get this question a lot. There's sharks out there, and there's dangerous things, and what happens if I get bit or stung or something happens to me down there? What is that? Have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, some. In fact, until recently, I had never had much experience diving with sharks. Mm-hmm. And we recently went on a dive vacation, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to do, was swim with sharks. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that sharks can sometimes be curious. They'll kind of hang around in the area and see what you are and what you're doing, but that they weren't aggressive. It's not Jaws.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want to punch him in the nose.
It's not Jaws. You don't have to punch the shark. You don't have to do any of that under the vast majority of cases. Maybe there's a case that there is, but that's not my experience. And what I honestly find is the most dangerous thing under the water is you letting your head run away or forgetting what you're doing, not paying attention. You're going to be the biggest thing that you need to keep in control. There's other things out there that can be an issue. You can get stung by jellyfish, but your dive guides are going to give you advice on, if you see, a stingray, don't hang out over the top of it, because they don't like that. If you see sharks, don't go swimming, bolting to the surface as fast as you can, because the shark, a curious animal, may decide to follow you. And then that's really going to freak you out. Right. But if you just are calm and dive and do the thing and look at stuff, you don't have to touch stuff. In fact, you shouldn't touch stuff. It's not good for marine life. If you do that, diving is certainly one of the safer things that you can be doing if you get proper training and you stay within the limits of your training. When it comes to things that could be dangerous, that's my take, is that make sure you stay within your training. That's the one of the reasons that divers get into trouble is they dive outside their training. They imagine that they can go places they can't, for example, in caves without proper training,
right,
or something like that, and they run into trouble. So we instruct all our divers, dive within your limits, dive within your training, get your gear serviced, eliminate all the other variables. Marine life is the least of your problems.
Okay. And then one last question I have for you is that a lot of people ask me, like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. And like, what is the expense to start out diving?
Well, I can just tell you, like our experience when we learned to dive. Our open water class, I think, was $700 a piece.
Yeah.
And that is probably, unless you get into some real specialized training like rebreather or cave or public safety diving, things of that nature, that's going to be your most expensive course, is that open water course.
Okay.
It also takes the longest because you're learning brand new skills from scratch. And so don't be surprised if that course takes you a couple evenings a week for 4 weeks or so and a couple of weekends. It's going to take that long for your training.
Okay.
But you're learning brand new stuff. You're learning about brand new gear and how it functions. You're learning a little bit of dive theory that you would never have to know before, so you probably don't know.
Right.
And there's a lot to learn. There's a steep curve.
Right.
So that's your most expensive and probably your longest training. But even so, if I were to, for example, play golf, or if I wanted to go hunting, so we live in Alaska, so everybody hunts. What does it cost to go hunting? It's a big joke up here that, I can get 1,000-pound moose and I'll have all that meat, but what did that cost me per pound?
True.
I buy a $2,000 or $3,000 hunting rifle. I spend all this money on gear. I have to take 2 weeks off of work. I have to go out in the middle of nowhere. I have to bring it back, package it, buy a meat grinder to grind it up, put it in the fridge. By the time I'm done, I could have bought filet mignon for the whole year for the same amount of money I just spent on this hunting trip. Now, people will tell you that, part of it's the experience and, I don't know, bonding or whatever. But we're talking about cost.
Right.
So that's far more expensive than becoming a diver.
And I guess diving would be, the experience is unbelievable,
And so little over 70% of the surface of the earth is water. If we don't dive, we miss out on a ton of what our planet has to offer. It's also something that you can take on any vacation. So any vacation I've been on, I have spent time diving in that location. I've spent time in the water all across the world. All across the world, there's good diving and great experiences, and they're never the same. We've been diving in an aquarium in Georgia, for example. Yeah. Anywhere from that to the Caribbean to the Pacific Ocean. Our local lakes and gravel pits, as public safety divers, we dive with a mission in mind. We have to go find evidence, or we have to go recover a victim. That you can take diving so many different ways. So if you want to go look at pretty fish, you can do that. If you want to do more working type dives or help people, you can do that. And there's just many ways that you can take some people want to become an instructor and they want to make their living on the dive industry. So it can even be a vocation. But we just talked about the cost of training. So what about the cost of gear? As you can see, we dive in Alaska. There's dry suits that need to play into this. There's BCDs, there's regulators, all this stuff you have to buy. When we first started diving, we bought the gear that we learned how to dive in. That was convenient for a couple reasons. One, we knew the gear very well. We just spent how many dives in the water with that exact gear. Right. Second of all, it allowed us to get in relatively inexpensive. Yep. I can't start golfing for $1,500. Right. You can't do it. Finally, I can rent my gear if I can't afford to buy it. Right. So we could, as long as we're certified to dive, as long as we have the training, we can go anywhere in the world walk into a dive shop, present our dive certification, and say, I'd like to rent dive gear and go on a dive with you guys.
Another option for dive gear would be to come and talk to the instructor and say, this is my budget, this is what I want, and have them work with you on it.
Oh, absolutely. I know that we do. If you come in our dive shop, we're going to have a conversation. And so where do you envision taking diving at this point? Where do you want to go? My recommendation would be until you have a certification and until you have a dozen dives, just rent your gear.
Yeah.
Kick the tires, make sure you're going to stay with it long term. And then as you develop, take another course, take your advanced open water course when you've got, 10, 12 dives under your belt. And then you'll learn more skills and you'll build on that. And then take your rescue diver. In my opinion, you're not a good dive buddy until you have been certified as a rescue diver. At that point, you can really assist someone else that's in the water. Your awareness grows to more than just yourself and the information on your gauges. Now you're becoming a little more globally aware. You're looking out for your buddy. And if you go on to become a dive master, now you have more global awareness. You're looking out for a group of people and trying to identify issues early. That's the thing I love about diving is you can't be bored.
Right.
You can't be bored. We went from looking at pretty fish to becoming public safety divers, diving in absolutely no light, no visibility, you can see nothing, to diving with sharks. And now we're looking at going and getting cave certified. Your interests may change, but the dive industry can always keep you interested and can always give you a good time. And it's not as expensive as you might think. It can be. You can go out and spend $15,000 on a rebreather, and you can buy cylinders. I mean, the cylinders that we have, most of those I bought before we opened a dive shop because I wanted my own stuff. I wanted my own cylinders. I didn't want to have to go to the dive shop every time we went diving. You can spend a lot of money. Work within your budget. You grow with your skill level. Your gear might grow with your skill level, but you can reprioritize things so that even those expensive things become part of your budget and you can budget for.
Okay. So it's kind of like any other sport that you do. You start off at the low end and then you can kind of build as your finances or whatever, your experience, your growth.
One thing I do have to say, that diving is somewhat similar even to playing a musical instrument, which can be expensive. If you play a musical instrument, you know that. You can buy the top of the line and you can spend some money. But like playing a musical instrument, becoming a diver, the skill at the beginning of your dive career, if you are diving the very best gear, it's going to be much easier to do than diving bad gear. So we learned diving Scuba Pro regulators and BCDs. And Scuba Pro regulators, we dove Mark 17s, they breathe very well. The gear line that we carry here in the shop is Deep 6. It breathes, in our opinion, just as well, if not a little bit better, which was shocking to us. We did not expect that. We were going to kick the tires on this new gear line and maybe go back to Scuba Pro or Aqualung, but we ended up liking it so much we stuck with it, and that's what we carry now. So good gear is going to make your experience better, and it's going to make your learning easier. So that's a two-sided coin. If you are able to somehow get good gear for a good price, your experience is going to be better than if you buy cheap gear at a cheap price. So.
Right. And your dive center would be able to help with that because a lot of times they have used gear that they use for rentals, and sometimes just like us, we bought the rental gear that we trained in, and it was good gear, and so it wasn't we didn't have to go out and pay top price. We were able to pay a lesser expense. So I mean that's an option too.
Because dive shops look to get they try to keep newer gear all the time in their shop. So we learned at a place called Wind and Water Hat Tip down in Ketchikan, and they dove Scuba Pro, top of the line, but after they'd had it for a couple of years, they were looking to sell it as used gear. So you can buy a great piece of gear for a really good price.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
dive centers tend to want their gear to be brand new for a number of reasons.
Right.
But even used gear is, if you follow the service requirements, which is every year or every 2 years, depending on the brand, if you get your gear serviced when you're supposed to get it serviced, even very old gear, it's still going to work. It also depends on how you service your gear and how well you keep it up. So we always
Right,
encourage
that's
you to
true.
follow the manufacturer's recommendations for gear service and keep your gear in top shape, whether you own less expensive gear or top of the line. Are those any more questions that you've been hit with that you can think of?
I can't think of any more, and those are the top questions that I have or you know what I mean, that I always get asked.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about becoming a new diver and you're unsure about the training, you're unsure about the environment or how you react, contact your local dive center and ask them about a Discover Scuba or some type of scuba experience that allows you to pay a small fee for a dive experience. It's not a certification, but it gets you breathing air underwater, and it's going to change your life. Next time on Training Talk, we're going to talk a little bit about how to choose a quality dive shop and a quality instructor.